If existence is real, active, and intelligible, why does it not explain itself verbally or explicitly? This question appears simple, yet it unsettles one of the most basic assumptions of modern thinking. We tend to believe that meaning should be articulated, that truth should announce itself clearly, and that reality should be accessible through language, explanation, and conceptual clarity. In everyday life, we expect understanding to arrive in the form of statements, definitions, or narratives. However, experience repeatedly contradicts this expectation. The most significant dimensions of human life, love, death, identity, and even awareness itself, resist precise verbalization. The more we attempt to explain them exhaustively, the more they seem to lose their immediacy. Excess explanation often produces abstraction rather than clarity. This tension suggests a deeper problem. Perhaps silence is not the absence of meaning, but its natural condition. Perhaps existence does not fail to speak, but instead operates in a mode that precedes speech altogether. This is not a poetic or mystical claim. It is an epistemological and cognitive question examined rigorously by Ibn Arabi, who treats silence as a structural feature of reality rather than a deficiency. Modern cognition operates under constant pressure to interpret, explain, and conclude. This pressure manifests as cognitive overload, chronic interpretive stress, and anxiety driven by continuous meaning-making. From a psychological perspective, the mind seeks stability through explanation, often equating understanding with verbal closure. Several scientific concepts clarify this tendency. Cognitive load theory demonstrates that excessive information processing degrades comprehension rather than improving it. The need for cognitive closure describes discomfort with ambiguity and a preference for definitive answers, even when evidence is incomplete. Narrative bias further pushes the mind to impose coherent stories on experiences that may not naturally possess them. As a result, silence is often perceived as a lack. Unexplained experiences trigger anxiety, and stillness is interpreted as emptiness or meaninglessness. The absence of commentary feels threatening rather than neutral. Yet this creates a paradox. The more aggressively we attempt to explain existence, the more unstable meaning becomes. Interpretation multiplies interpretations, producing confusion rather than resolution. This is where Ibn Arabi's analysis becomes relevant. He does not treat silence as a failure of communication, but as a necessary condition for reality to remain intelligible at all. Ibn Arabi, writing in the 12th and 13th centuries, is often mischaracterized as a purely mystical or poetic thinker. In reality, he was a systematic metaphysician deeply concerned with how reality discloses itself and how human cognition relates to that disclosure. His project was not emotional spirituality, but structural analysis of being, knowledge, and perception. Central to his thought is the concept of wujud, or existence itself. Ibn Arabi asks how being appears, how it is known, and why it resists complete conceptual capture. His conclusion is precise. Existence is not an object that speaks. Speech belongs to forms, distinctions, and representations. Being itself is prior to all of these. Existence reveals, but it does not narrate. Meaning does not arrive as a declaration embedded in reality. Instead, it arises relationally, through the interaction between awareness and what appears. This framework anticipates modern discussions in consciousness studies and cognitive science, all of which recognize limits to linguistic representation. Ibn Arabi's first major claim is that being does not talk because it is not separate from what appears. Speech requires distance between a subject who speaks and an object being described. Pure existence lacks this distance. It is not something standing apart from experience. It is the condition of experience itself. Language belongs to differentiation. It names, separates, and categorizes. Silence, by contrast, belongs to unity. From a cognitive perspective, this aligns with the idea of preconceptual awareness. Before perception is labeled, judged, or categorized, it is simply registered. Awareness occurs prior to language. A simple example illustrates this. You experience pain before you name it. The sensation is immediate and non-verbal. The label pain arrives afterward as a conceptual summary. Explanation follows awareness. It does not generate it. The same applies to emotions, sensory perception, and even the sense of self. From this perspective, silence is not emptiness. It is undivided presence. It is the state in which experience occurs before being fragmented into symbols. Ibn Arabi offers a subtle but rigorous critique of language. Words do not carry reality itself. They compress it. Language is a tool of abstraction, designed to manage complexity by reducing it into symbols. While this increases efficiency, it decreases fidelity. Cognitive science supports this view. Symbolic abstraction allows the brain to function efficiently by simplifying vast amounts of sensory data. However, simplification inevitably omits detail. Neuroscientifically, rich perceptual input is transformed into manageable representations. Trading depth for USABILITY. Consider the word tree. It replaces thousands of perceptual details, texture, movement, color variation, spatial depth with a single symbol. This symbol stabilizes communication, but it also flattens experience. The word is not the tree. It is a functional reduction. Ibn Arabi warns that over-reliance on language distances consciousness from being. When words are mistaken for reality itself, experience becomes secondary to description. Existence remains silent not because it lacks content, but because language cannot carry its full density without distortion. To address this limitation, Ibn Arabi introduces the concept of dak, or direct tasting. This refers to a form of knowledge that does not pass through discursive reasoning or verbal mediation. It is immediate, experiential, and non-symbolic. The distinction here mirrors modern psychology's separation between explicit and implicit cognition. Explicit knowledge is verbal and reportable. Implicit knowledge operates without conscious articulation. Skills such as balance, coordination, or emotional recognition function without constant explanation. You maintain balance while walking without narrating the process. You recognize emotional states before you describe them. In these cases, silence allows information to operate without distortion. Explanation, if introduced prematurely, can interfere with performance. Silence, in this sense, is not ignorance. It is a mode of knowing that precedes language. It is non-symbolic cognition, operating directly rather than representation. Ibn Arabi identifies a paradox. Excessive articulation destroys meaning. Cognitive science describes a similar phenomenon as the over-analysis effect, when attention becomes overly focused on explaining processes that normally operate implicitly. Performance and clarity degrade. Explaining intuition often weakens it. Overthinking disrupts flow states. From a philosophical standpoint, meaning requires openness. It cannot survive total enclosure by explanation. When every aspect of experience is forced into language, Interpretive space collapses. Existence preserves silence to prevent this collapse. Silence maintains flexibility, allowing meaning to remain dynamic rather than rigid. It is not the enemy of understanding, but its safeguard. Silence is frequently misunderstood. It is not passivity, nihilism, or withdrawal from reason. Ibn Arabi is explicit on this point. Silence is ontological, not emotional. It describes how reality exists, not how one feels about it. Silence does not reject intellect. It defines its boundary. This parallels modern epistemology. Mathematics assumes axioms it cannot prove. Science presupposes observation it cannot fully explain. These foundational silences are not failures, but necessities. Silence, therefore, is the foundation of knowledge, not its absence. It marks the point where explanation becomes possible without becoming destructive. Translated into modern terms, Ibn Arabi's insight suggests reducing compulsive interpretation, improving emotional regulation, and lowering cognitive fatigue. Practices such as non-interpretive observation, attention without narration, and tolerance of ambiguity are supported by contemporary research. Neuroscientifically, reduced verbal narration quiets the default mode network associated with rumination and stress. Studies show that non-verbal awareness practices decrease stress markers and improve perceptual accuracy. This is not spirituality in a vague sense. It is cognitive hygiene. Silence restores the mind's ability to register reality without distortion. Existence does not speak because it is not separate. Language belongs to division. Being belongs to unity. Ibn Arabi's contribution lies in recognizing silence not as mystery, but as structural necessity. Meaning survives because silence protects it. When explanation ends, presence begins. Silence is not what existence withholds. It is how existence remains whole.